So not as though verse 11, if by any means I might attain into the resurrection of the dead. And he's not like, see, you can't earn. If you're thinking about salvation, like you can't earn your physical bodily resurrection at the rapture or at the final resurrection. You can't earn that, obviously. So what's he talking about? If by any means I might attain to the resurrection of the dead. It's this lived out cycle. It's this lived out cycle of having a reorder cycle in your life. And how do you have that lived out cycle in your life? It's by being in fellowship with his sufferings and being made conformable to his death. Not as though I had already attained or already were perfect. So no, he's like, look, I don't have this I have arrived attitude, mentality. I'm not a spiritual elitist like the Calvinists or the Gnostics, okay? But I'm constantly pursuing. I'm constantly following after, that I may apprehend that for which I am also apprehended of Jesus Christ. So he must constantly press. I count myself not to have apprehended. I haven't arrived, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, all this stuff over here, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before. Now, this is the pattern. Remember, we were just talking about how Paul is a pattern. This is what we should be doing. And Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ in multiple places. I press toward the mark for the prize, forgetting those things which are behind. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. So the Christian life is one of constant pressing. And it's like, it's what when the English Bible says not by works, the Chinese phrase would be something like wu wei. It's not that there's no effort there. It's that you're kind of in a flow state where there's like this effortless oneness with the flow of the reality that is Christ. Something like that. And I'm very intentionally saying something like that because the way it really is ineffable. There's nothing you can say that measures up to. I think before I kicked T. Grogan out, he was saying something like, how can you know who Christ is if it's not defined? And that's like the opposite way of things. Like words, the universe does not come captured in words. Okay? If it could be, I mean, if Christ is Christ, he would be Christ, even if none of us could speak. If we were all illiterate and we're not fluent in any language, Christ would still be Christ. So just because we've invented a language doesn't mean it is sufficient to the task of accurately pointing to what the thing is. Now, language is very helpful and very useful. We got a lot of videos on this. I just did some recently. But to think that you're just out there lost and floating around without words is the exact opposite of how things really are. Words, when you capture things only in words, that's when you are most actually out there lost, floating around without any mooring. In Acts 17:22, he hath given assurance, by the way, Christ, in him we live, move, breathe, and have our being. I always add breathe to that by mistake. As certain also of your own poets have said, for you also are his offspring. Paul said this to lost people and quoted their own poets. It's very interesting that he does this. Whereof he hath appointed a day and given assurance. That word assurance is the word pistis. It's the Greek word pistis. It's the same word that's translated as belief and faith 239 times in your New Testament. He hath given assurance unto all men, in that he hath raised him from the dead. And your resurrection cycles in your life, first of all, this should give you assurance that the resurrection cycles are coming your way in the 2 Corinthians chapter 4 sense, as we covered earlier. And when other people recognize, you're an epistle known and read of all men, when other people recognize and see the resurrection cycle in your life, that gives assurance to them that the way of Christ is legit. It's the real deal. One of the best ways you can witness.